Hey everybody, Suz here, back with another Keto Dinner Ideas video. This week we are bringing you 4 keto recipes that are all dairy-free keto recipes, as well as all under 5 net carbs each. If you're new here, please hit that subscribe button and join the crew. We make these videos every single week to give you some motivation to stay on track with your keto diet. And let's just get into it. I wanna catch the wave. To start with, we made this turmeric ginger chicken over cauliflower rice. Then a medium mixing bowl, I'm taking half a cup of unsweetened coconut milk, and I am using the rest of the coconut milk for other recipes this week. It is a little pricey, so I always try to pre-plan and make sure I'm using it in more than one recipe whenever I open a can. Also adding about a tablespoon extra virgin olive oil, a teaspoon of minced garlic, a teaspoon of ground turmeric, 1 tablespoon of grated ginger, a teaspoon of ground coriander, half a teaspoon of ground cumin, a half a teaspoon of sea salt, and 1 tablespoon of lime juice, and I'm just using the concentrated kind. I'm just whisking that together until it's all smooth, sticking it to the side. Now the original recipe that I'll have linked down below called for 4 boneless, skinless chicken breasts. I'm using 3 because they are pretty large, and I just have them in a freezer bag, pouring the marinade on top. Now I'm going to make sure I've got a little bit of air in my bag, zip it. Having a little bit of air in there just helps to shake this chicken up and make sure it's all fully coated with the marinade. Once all of my chicken has the marinade on it, I'm just gonna open this bag back up a crack and squeeze all of the excess air out of it, and then fold it up and stick it in the fridge to marinate. Now, anytime you're marinating stuff, I think if you can do it overnight, it's probably going to be better and taste better, but I'm just doing mine for a couple of hours in the fridge. Now when you get ready to fry it up, I have a cast iron skillet. It is well seasoned, and then also sprayed it with a little olive oil. Have it on medium-high heat, adding my chicken to the pan, washing my hands, and then just adding a little bit of ground black pepper on top. The recipe didn't call for that, but I wanted it. Cooking those for about 7 minutes on each side. Flipping those, I'm going to do 7 minutes on the other side. And then I'm just going to flip them back to the original side and pop the entire cast iron in a 350-degree oven for about 20 minutes to get my chicken to temperature of at least at 165. And after it comes out of the oven, I served it up over a little cauliflower rice that I steamed in the microwave with some Kerrygold butter, another splash of lime juice, and a little salt and pepper. This was absolutely delicious. Very, very easy meal to throw together, and the chicken stayed nice and moist, and you could even marinate this chicken and finish it up in the crock pot or the Instant Pot or bake it in the oven. So very versatile keto chicken recipe to try out. Next up, we have this awesome creamy Chipotle pork chop. I served it over zoodles. So to start with, we're going to make a rub for our pork by adding a tablespoon of chili con carne powder, a teaspoon regular paprika, a half a teaspoon ground cumin, a half a teaspoon red pepper flakes, and a half teaspoon sea salt, whisking that all together until it's well combined. Now for our pork chops, they called for 4 to 5 boneless center cut pork chops in the original recipe that I'll link down below. I opted to use 3 nice sized bone-in pork chops instead, and I'm just going to sprinkle with one hand and rub with the other our seasoning mixture all over our pork chops, and flipping them over and also doing the other side as well. And I am really coating these really, really well with the seasoning blends. Then I am taking a knife that is probably so dull I need to throw it away, but I'm sure I won't, and just cutting little slits through the fat on the edges of my pork chops because this is going to help them from buckling up in the pan. Now I'm going ahead and making the sauce for this by taking a food processor and adding 1 cup of our unsweetened coconut milk. If you don't have a food processor, you could do this in a blender. To that I'm adding about 1/4 of a cup of fresh cilantro, a half a teaspoon red pepper flakes, and then they called for a teaspoon liquid smoke. I'm using the smoked paprika instead, 1 teaspoon of that, because I want a little bit of that smoky flavor, but I'm not a big fan of that artificial kind of smoke flavor. Pulsing this together until it is well blended, and then I'm just pouring it into a little separate dish. We're going to stick this to the side while we fry our pork chops. Now I'm using an electric skillet set on 350 for this, adding a few tablespoons of avocado oil. You can use whatever cooking fat you would like for this recipe, and if you're doing it in a regular skillet, just over medium-high heat. I'm adding about a half a teaspoon of minced garlic to this and just kind of sauteing that around for a few seconds until it's fragrant. And then I'm adding my pork chops to the pan, and now I'm going to fry these on this side for about 5 minutes or so, using some tongs to flip them over. You can see how that seasoning blend is nice and dark on our pork chops. They almost look burnt, but they're not. It's just the seasoning. And I'm gonna do them about another 5 minutes on this side, looking for that internal temperature of about 165. And I am using a meat thermometer to double check that. Now we're just gonna pour our sauce mixture on top of these. And I did go ahead and cut the heat down to low at this point. And I'm just going to use my spatula to go ahead and scrape up all of those bits off of the bottom of the pan and all of that yummy juice that is coming out of our pork chop to make our gravy. And I'm just going to swirl these chops around in that. Meanwhile, I did go ahead and steam some zoodles. I just like to buy them frozen, zucchini in the microwave. And I'm just topping that with a little bit of that sauce and one of the pork chops. And I did put another pinch of cilantro right on top. This was excellent. But, you know, it's a lot of work to pull your food processor out. For me, it is anyway. So I asked my husband if it was worth it. He said it definitely was. I'm not convinced yet that it was worth it. I think maybe I could make this even easier, but it definitely was a great new way to cook pork chops on a keto diet. And I did enjoy it. But again, you know, food processor. Next up, we have this awesome fish taco cabbage bowl. This was so good. I wasn't sure I would like this one. So to start with, we're going to make a dressing for our slaw for this recipe. So I have a cup of mayo. I like to use this Chosen Foods avocado oil mayo. The original recipe linked down below called for 2 teaspoons of green Tabasco sauce. I didn't have that or feel like making it, so I'm using my favorite chili garlic sauce, very spicy, and adding 2 teaspoons of that, along with 2 tablespoons of lime juice, and then about 1/4 teaspoon of sea salt, and I'm just whisking this all together until it's nicely combined. In a medium-sized mixing bowl, this original recipe called for like half of this kind of cabbage and another half of this kind. I'm just using, I think this is a 12 or 14 ounce bag. It's supposed to be a tricolor blend, but you can see it's missing most of the red cabbage. To that I'm adding about 1/4 cup of chopped green onion, and I use the light green and dark green parts. And then I'm just mixing this together a little bit with my spoon to kind of get those evenly distributed before adding our dressing to it. And I'm just adding about 3/4 of that mixture, saving about 1/4 cup to the side to drizzle on top of our salads after we assemble them. Mixing this together until all of our cabbage is just lightly coated with this dressing mix. And then we're going to get started on our fish. So for that, we are going to put together a rub. So you can use 2 teaspoons of any kind of fish seasoning that you like. I'm using this Old Bay blackening seasoning. To that, I am adding 1 teaspoon of ground cumin, 1/2 teaspoon of chili powder, just like a chili con carne powder. And I'm just whisking this together with my fork. And then for our fish, I have 4 about 6 ounce wild caught Atlantic cod fillets. And I'm drizzling a little extra virgin olive oil on those and kind of rubbing it in. And then just like we did the pork chops, I'm sprinkling with one hand and I'm gonna rub it in with the other and just make sure we fully coat and season this fish really well. And if you don't have cod, you could use any firm white fish. Now over on the stovetop, I have a large skillet, medium-high heat, adding a couple tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil to our pan and putting our fish in. And I'm just gonna cook this about 4 minutes on each side, flipping it over to the other side. And I'm not worried about this fish being perfectly intact or anything. It is staying pretty intact because it's a firm fish, but we are just gonna transfer this after we do it for 4 minutes on this side. Make sure it's nice and flaky, transferring it all to a big metal bowl. And then I'm just gonna let it rest for a few minutes and then take 2 forks and shred this apart. You could just leave your fish fillets whole, and I probably would normally do that, but I was trying to follow this recipe as closely as possible, and they do shred their fish, so I figured I would give it a try, and I did like it this way. Now to assemble our fish taco cabbage bowls, I'm just putting a little bit of our slaw mix into a bottom of a salad bowl, topping it with some of our fish, drizzling it with a tiny bit of that dressing that we reserved, and a little bit of green onion. Now this was absolutely delicious. It was so refreshing. I gotta tell you, I thought about changing the mayo and using sour cream for this dressing mixture instead because I'm not a big mayonnaise fan, but I wanted to keep this dairy-free since I'm trying to do dairy-free keto recipes this week. I went ahead and stuck with the mayo. I stored everything in the fridge separate, and for leftovers I was just able to heat the fish just a little bit and then assemble it, and so it was even great great left over the next day for a keto lunch. Lastly, look how good this looks in the picture. This is a green soup, and I was very skeptical about this recipe. Of course, the original recipe is linked down below, but to start with, in a large pot over medium-high heat, I added avocado oil. You could use whichever type of fat or cooking oil you wanted. Once it was hot, I turned the heat down to medium and added about half a cup of diced onion. I'm just going to cook that for a few minutes until it starts to get soft. Did sprinkle it with a little bit of sea salt, adding a 12-ounce bag of thawed cauliflower, also adding some salt on top of it, which brings us to about a fourth to a half a teaspoon of salt total. I'm just going to let it cook for a few minutes until it is softened, and then I'm going to add 2 cups of vegetable stock to our pot. Put a lid on, bring that to a boil. Once our cauliflower is all the way softened, taking the lid off and adding 1 5-ounce package of baby spinach, along with a cup of Italian flat leaf parsley, and I didn't chop it up because we're going to be blending this all together. A half a teaspoon of grated ginger that I just had in this little measuring cup, and 1 tablespoon of coconut cream, the coconut milk that we've been cooking with all week. That almost does it for that. And I'm just stirring this from the bottom until all of our greens are nice and wilted. And then I'm going to just take a ladle and transfer all of this to a blender and blend it on up. If you had an immersion blender, you could just stick that in your pot and do it. And then I do have the heat turned off at this point, and I'm just pouring it all back in. And here it is plated up. I just drizzled a tiny bit of the coconut cream I had left over on top. And because I had some green onion still from other recipes, I put a little of those on top. This was actually excellent. My husband and I both agreed that we just felt healthier as we were eating it. This is a recipe that I would not normally make, as pre-keto I ate even less vegetables than I do now on a ketogenic diet. Not something I would cook all the time, but definitely to change things up a little bit. It was a refreshing recipe to make and was actually pretty easy to come together, other than blending the soup, which if you've been watching for a while, you know I usually don't like doing. So there you go. That's this week's keto dinner ideas. All of these are under 5 net carbs. I mean, of course, that's going to vary depending on the exact ingredients that you choose, but for the most part, you can be safe to say under 5 net carbs per serving. And they're also all dairy free, as I know some of you out there are not able to eat dairy, so I like to film these every now and then. As always, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Comment down below any suggestions, recipes you'd like to see us tackle, video topics you would like to see on our channel. Share this video. The more eyes on it, the more encouraged you are to keep filming them. And until next time, bye y'all.